Lock in. Focus. Let's see. Push he takes. No. No. Take, he takes, I take, he takes, I take, he takes, I take, he takes. Oh, even if he takes, I still have. Right, I take. Boom. Boom.
Yeah, I do expect that AI5 will go into Optimus and into the data center because it's looking like able to self-driving that's far greater than human safety levels. So, um, which means it's not it's certainly not immediately needed in the car. Um, at some point, I think it will make sense for us to switch to AI5 in the car, but there's not a pressing issue to do so. Um, so, but at some point, the AI4 hardware is going to get like so old that it's like, okay, the only reason they keep in the factory open is for AI4. Um, we are planning an AI4 upgrade to use newer generation RAM. So it'll go from 16 gigabytes to I think 32 gigabytes per SoC, so a total of 64 gigabytes, and probably a 10% increase in compute, sort of place of operations per second, and in memory bandwidth. So that's AI 4.1, AI 4 Plus probably goes into production middle of next year. I think depends. It depends on Samsung's doing the modifications for us, so it sort of depends on when they're able to finish those modifications and bring it to production.
Great. The next question is, now that FSD has been approved in the Netherlands and is expected to launch across Europe this summer, can you discuss your robotaxi strategy for the region?
Well, we're probably jumping a gun here on robotaxi in Europe since it took us an immense amount of time just to get supervised self-driving in Europe. And these we don't control the regulators. It's we push as hard as we can, but it's ultimately up to the governments in Europe and the EU to decide what to do. As it is, we've only been approved in the Netherlands. We expect to be approved in a lot of other countries. And I think the supervised FSD goes to Brussels for EU review in May. Yeah. So, obviously, the next thing beyond that is to
He takes. I take.
aim for
He takes.
unsupervised
I take.
self-driving or robotaxi in Europe. I actually don't know what the time frame for that is, and would be somewhat at the mercy of the regulators as to when that approval would take place.
From a technology standpoint, what we deployed in Netherlands and Europe is the same exact architecture and the training procedure and so on, except it had more Europe data. And I suspect the same thing will be true for unsupervised FSD as well. Whatever we use to solve in the US will work in other places in the rest of the world too, provided we were able to add the data from the local regions.
Yeah.
The next question is, given the recent NHTSA incident filings, can you update us on the robotaxi safety data? If safety validation remains the primary bottleneck, why not deploy thousands of vehicles to accelerate removal of the safety driver?
Sure, do you want to take that?
Yeah, we are increasing the amount of our QA fleet, but we also want to use the customer fleet to give us the useful metrics back so that we can scale it safely. Like Elon mentioned, we are absolutely focused on safety, and so far we have zero incidents, and that's what the NHTSA filing also shows. In addition to safety, we are also solving some of these so-called scaling issues. For example, you do not want the robotaxi to be stuck blocking in intersections, or don't want to be dropping people off at slightly incorrect locations and so on. So we're simultaneously solving the long tail of safety by monitoring the metrics across the entire Tesla customer vehicle fleet, which are is close to driving 10 billion miles on FSD in the next few weeks, and also scaling up the amount of QA fleet that we have across the entire US to accelerate our safety validation, while also scaling the rest of the factors that can throttle the increase of unsupervised vehicles.
The next question is V14.3 still the last piece of the puzzle to enable large-scale unsupervised FSD and robotaxi, or do we have to wait until V15?
I think 14.3 is last piece of the puzzle for unsupervised FSD. Now the question is like degrees of safety, like how safety and convenience, I suppose. We have a lot of known improvements, like major architectural improvements that we know would improve the probability of safety significantly. So it's not going to make sense for us to deploy, unsupervised FSD or robotaxi at large scale when we know that there are major architectural improvements to the software that can improve safety. So I think we're going to want to finish writing that software, validate it, and release it before going to large scale unsupervised FSD. Depending on what large scale means. I mean, we are, of course, as I mentioned earlier, doing unsupervised FSD in 3 cities, and we'll expand to, like I said, probably a dozen states or more later this year. So kind of depends on what your definition of large scale is. But I do think it wouldn't be right for us to go to like very large scale unsupervised FSD when we know that there are software improvements in the pipeline that would improve safety.
Yep, and I'd like to note that the version of robotaxi that's running in Austin, Dallas, Houston, etc., those are essentially 14.3 variants, and it's obviously safe. That's why we're able to launch in those cities, and we continue to expand based on the V14.3 base for a while until V15 lands. And V15 is going to be a major upgrade.
Okay, thank you. The next 2 questions we've already answered about robotaxi rollout and the data that we're observing. So we will end on the last question, which is what is Tesla doing to scale the energy generation business with solar? Residential roof deployments have stalled. Will Tesla move to regional solar and battery farms, perhaps coupled to superchargers? Will we deploy solar through utilities?
The overall U.S. residential solar market is going through a bit of a correction after the loss of the homeowner tax credit last year, but we still see strong demand shaping up for the second half of the year. Tesla introduced a lease product this year that allows us to capture the tax credit ourselves and offer competitive pricing for homeowners. We've also debuted our own solar panel with superior performance and aesthetics, as well as our own best-in-class mounting system that gives us a fully integrated home energy ecosystem. We strongly believe that solar and storage markets globally will continue to grow at both residential and utility scale, and we will continue to invest in that growth.
Thank you, Mike. So now we're going to move on to analyst questions. The first question is going to come from Will Stein at Truist. Will, please feel free to unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks for taking my question. Considering the various parties involved in the TerraFab project, I'm hoping you can provide us details for investors about which party is going to take responsibility for each aspect of that project, funding it, designing it, building it, operating, taking production, and the like. We'd love to hear some more details.
Yeah, so we're still working out the details of the TerraFab deployment. In the near term, Tesla will be building the research fab on our Giga Texas campus. This is something we expect to be probably, a $3 billion-ish initiative, and capable of maybe a few thousand wafers per month. But it's really intended to try out ideas, research lab, both in terms of maybe we have some ideas for improving the fundamental technology of how chips are made, and there's some new physics we'd like to test out. But we also want to test out the ability to see if something is working in production. So you need kind of like a few thousand wafer starts a month to make sure that the production process is sound. And then on the SpaceX is going to take care of like the initial phase of the scaled up TerraFab. That's what we've figured out thus far. Any kind of company thing has to be approved by both the SpaceX and Tesla board of directors. It's got to go through conflict resolution. It's going to have unfortunately, a lot of complexity because we've got to make sure Tesla shareholders are served and SpaceX shareholders are served and strike the right balance there. So it takes a while to work through the kind of independent director reviews on this. So that's basically what we've figured out thus far is Tesla's doing the research fab, SpaceX doing the initial part of the large-scale TerraFab, and then we got to figure out the rest.
And what about Intel's involvement?
So Intel is excited to partner with us on some of the core manufacturing technologies. We plan to use Intel's 14A process, which is state of the art. In fact, not yet totally complete. But given that by the time TerraFab scales up, 14A will be probably fairly mature or ready for prime time. 14A seems like the right move, and we have a great relationship with Intel. A lot of respect for the CEO, the CTO, the new team there. So I think it's going to be a great partnership.
Another thing on the research lab, I think we've said it before, plan to do memory, logic, everything in the same place, including mass, because we want to have a quick iteration loop so that we can see and basically scale the technologies which we're trying to bring up.
Yeah, I think this will be unique in the world, or at least I'm not aware of a place where you have the lithography mask creation, and then logic, memory, and packaging under one roof in one building. That's about the fastest I could possibly imagine doing recursive research and development, and being able to try out some pretty radical ideas, some of which have it's kind of long shot stuff, but if some of these long shots pan out, would be radical improvements in the way chips work.
Great. The next question is going to come from Pierre at New Street. Peter, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, thanks a lot for taking my question. A quick one first on FSD adoption. So you have 187 new users, paying users this quarter, and I compare that to your overall install base, it might be 15%, but then if I shrink that to the US or to North America, where most of them are, it's probably more like 35%. And and I compare that to you probably sold about 100,000 cars in North America in the quarter, so you're winning twice more FSD users and you're selling cars. And then if I add to that picture the fact that I guess it's mostly hardware for owners who subscribe to FSD, it sounds like most drivers in North America who have hardware for will already be using FSD. Is that the right way to think about it? And the kind of like success FSD is meeting today, is that the right way to think about it?
I think you're thinking about it the right way, Pierre. And the other thing which I'll share is that, you can't just look at one quarter versus the other quarter in terms of churn, but we are actually seeing churn of subscribers also coming down, which again is a reflection of the product is getting better. And obviously, if subscriptions are going up, that is a good metric. The other thing also to note is that we are seeing customers actually drive longer, which again, you could correlate it. That's why you have lesser churn, because people are liking the product. And I've said this before, if I just use my own personal behavior, right, I literally get in the car, I press the button, and it just goes. And earlier I used to park, now I don't even have to park. That is the experience which we want everybody to get. And that's why you're starting seeing it in the numbers come through.
Excellent, thank you. And if I may, maybe a quick follow-up, completely different. It's more on the Optimus architecture. And you talked about the partnership with XAI and Grok, and I was wondering if you can share with us anything about how the system to intelligence is going to be implemented. Is that going to be on board on chips inside Optimus, or if we should think about like a fleet of like 1 million Optimus being produced a year, actually driving very significant inference demand in data centers as well for system to thinking.
We can put a lot of intelligence locally in the robot, and it certainly needs to be enough intelligence that if the robot gets disconnected, like if it's a bad cellular signal, there isn't Wi-Fi, Optimus can't just get stuck. It needs to have enough local intelligence that it can still do useful things, even if it loses the connection. Kind of like the car. Like the car does not need any cellular Wi-Fi connection to be able to drive safely. Now, I guess you can think of like Optimus needs kind of a manager to tell it what to do. And broadly speaking, like if, otherwise it's going to keep doing the same thing it did before. So, I think you need kind of an orchestration AI, which, Grok would be good for orchestration. And then for Optimus's voice, having a low latency, intelligent voice AI, Grok is actually very good for that. So if you want to talk to Optimus and have kind of a Grok level conversation, you need to connect to a Grok level AI for that. But I would expect the amount of interaction, apart from like the voice stuff and asking complicated questions of the robot, that necessarily needs a large AI model to answer. Probably have about as much interaction with Optimus as a manager would have with the people on their team. So meeting Optimus could like work for several hours without any management oversight.
come from Dan at Barclays. Dan, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for taking questions. Elon, your chip suppliers generally generate pretty good economics on the chip they sell. Your approach has historically been on vertical integration. Part of that is to get better economics. So I know the longer term goal of Terafab is to get the supply you need, but how much of Terafab is also motivated to get better economics on your midterm chip purchases? And how long does it take to ramp to get to a yield that achieves that type of economic parity?
No, I mean, TerraFab is not some sort of mechanism to generate leverage over our chip suppliers. It's just literally we don't see a path to having enough a sufficient quantity of AI chips down the road as we scale production to high levels. Just the rate at which the industry is growing in logic, but even more so in memory, it just doesn't. You know, we just anticipate hitting the wall if we don't make chips ourselves. So that's the reason for the TerraFab. I think that we do have some ideas for how to make maybe radically better AI chips. And these are kind of research ideas there, you know, which means like long shot, but if long shot pays off, it's maybe a giant improvement. And it's just easier to do that if we have our own research fab and are developing our own production technologies. And if you look sort of long term at, you know, say having AI satellites, making chips for those, there's no way in hell the existing industry can keep up with that. It's impossible.
All right, and our next question is going to come from Mark at Goldman Sachs. Mark, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for taking my question. I recognize the importance of FSD and that FSD can help to drive vehicle sales, and nice to see some of the improvements in the FSD technology more recently with version 14. However, I'm also hoping to understand if the company's view on new vehicle models has evolved. And I ask, given that Elon, you posted on X recently that Tesla could develop a family vehicle. There's also been some past discussion about a compact vehicle.
Well, I mean, Cybercab is the compact vehicle. It's actually, I mean, it's very roomy, but it's a two-person vehicle. And we do think probably most of our production long term will be Cybercab because 90% of miles driven are with one or two people. So it would mean that, you know, you want a vast majority of your production to be Cybercab. But over time it's going to make sense for our whole lineup to be autonomous vehicles of different sizes. And I did talk a bit about this when we did the AI day in LA at Warner Brothers, and, you know, showed like this is our current lineup, and this is what, you know, some idea of what our future lineup will be, which is that it's going to be almost entirely autonomous. In fact, long term, the only manually driven car will be the new Tesla Roadster. Speaking of which, we may be able to debut that in a month or so. It requires a lot of testing and validation before we can actually have a demo and not, you know, have something go wrong with the demo. But I think it will be one of the most exciting product unveils ever. I'm not sure. I don't think it moves the needle massively from a revenue standpoint. So, but it is very cool. And I think it might be one of the most spectacular demos ever.
All right, Mark, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. My other question was on batteries, and the company mentioned batteries as a constraint on its growth. can you speak more to how Tesla expects to resolve this? To what extent that might come from ramping up your own LFP and 4680 battery cell manufacturing, or is this something that you'd expect to resolve primarily with increased sourcing from suppliers? Thank you.
Yeah, so at the moment, I think the limiter is not the cells itself, it's the battery pack capacity. And, we're, like I said in my opening remarks, we're actively working on resolving this. There's more capacity being added as we speak, and I'll let Lars add a few more things to it.
Yeah, thanks. As you guys may have seen in Berlin, we started launching Model Y battery pack with our in-house 4680 cells a few months ago, and that is ramping up nicely, adding to Berlin's output and helping with the demand surge that we've seen in Europe as well. We're adding additional capacity in our Reno facility, sort of retooling it as it's been building packs now for almost 10 years, and in order to put in some more efficient lines and get additional output out there. And then we continue to have growth in China as well, ramping in-house LFP module production and battery packs associated with that. So all of those things are happening now and in the next months, and that's really plans we laid out a few months back to increase that output with the growing demand.
All right, thank you guys. And our next analyst is going to be Colin from Wells Fargo. Colin, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, great. Thanks for taking my questions. You moved the safety driver in Austin, and you're now expanding into Dallas and Houston. What are the key safety metrics that you're tracking that gives you confidence that Robotaxi is safe enough to expand? Is it sort of miles per intervention, miles per accident, per fatality, and where do you stand on that now?
Yeah, we track basically all the metrics that you mentioned. We have a pretty large QA fleet spread across all of the United States, and then we look at any intervention that could happen, and then sort of simulate both in practice and also in our simulators that are very, very good nowadays using neural networks as what would have happened. And then based on all these analysis, we in the end make the call to expand. And so far, all of the expansions have gone according to our expectations.
Got it.
A lot of the limiting, a lot of what limits wider deployment of Robotaxi are actually not safety issues, but convenience issues, or the car basically gets paranoid and gets stuck